So we are here to talk about Disciplined Agile. What is it? What's it all about? How should I think of it as someone that has worked in Agile before? What does it bring to the table that maybe other methods don't, or some unique things about it? What does it mean for me as an Agilist just coming in cold? So we'll talk through that. So a little bit about me, first of all. I've been working in Agile about 20 years at this point. You can see some of the companies along my journey. And I'd say that much of my experience has been in large company Agile transformations and using really a variety of Agile methods that you can obviously are very familiar with. Scrum, Kanban, XP, feature-driven development, SAFe, especially in the last several years. So a lot of experience working with Agile methods and practices specifically, training, team level, portfolio, program level, and obviously a few certifications in the Agile industry. So I've been working in Agile for really since the manifesto itself came out. A lot of experience. So we're going to talk about Disciplined Agile from someone that has this kind of familiarity with Agile. What does it mean to me? And as a coach or a Scrum Master, what does it mean to you? So a couple of quick notes. So this is an Agile Hartford event. So here's where you can always find us. Any of these resources will be your best friend. AgileHartford.org is our website. It's always up to date with our latest information. And what I can tell you is on December 15th, we're going to have a remote session with Dave West from Scrum.org. Dave is an incredible speaker, so I'd encourage you, if you're not burned out on Zoom or don't have family plans over the holiday time, join us for this event. It's going to be a great event. Dave's a fantastic speaker, and you can sign up. Just go to our website, AgileHartford.org. You can find it on Eventbrite, and as always, it's free, and that'll be our last event for the year. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about what's the current state of Agile. 20 years on, how are the perceptions in the industry? What are people saying about Agile? What are they saying about its future? Where has it failed us? Where has it succeeded? From there, we'll talk about Disciplined Agile. Just where does it come from? Where did it start? The origins of it? What's happened with it in the last couple of years? And then we'll get into, if I'm new to this and I'm interested in Disciplined Agile, what are the steps I need to take to start a Disciplined Agile adoption? What are my first steps to getting to a Disciplined Agile ecosystem? Then we'll wrap up with some additional resources, and we'll definitely have time for some questions. Definitely interested in your guys' perspectives on things, anything you want to talk about in relation to Disciplined Agile. So I have been through, I'm certified as a DA Scrum Master and Senior Scrum Master. So much of this information comes directly from the training that PMI put out. And I can also offer some perspective on what I see as kind of good things and bad things about DA. So what's the current state of Agile? So I love this chart, the Agile Landscape version 3. So Agile has, what's going on in industry is they've said that Agile has lost its agility. There seems to be a lot of prescriptive approaches to Agile, very regimented. If you look over here, for example, you see SAFe, the Scaled Agile Framework. Well, here's what it does. Here's less. Here's what it does. So the inference is it's lost its agility. We've kind of locked on to defined process and practice and very little in the way of adopting. We've effectively become what we were meant to push back against, which is form and structure, and the perception is we've lost our agility. So why I say that too is, and I'm sure many of you have been involved in adoptions or transformations where there's one method to rule them all, and everyone's going to do that method, whether it's Scrum, Kanban, SAFe, even some hybrid. Everyone's got to follow the same prescription, especially in large enterprises. There's a lot of desire for that consistency. That's not really how Agile was meant to be, right? Agile was meant to be driven by the manifesto, by the principles. The practices are ways that we can manifest the principles. So, but the perception and the adoption of Agile has resulted in a kind of, well, we're going with this one method. Everyone's going to do that. the last bullet point I had here was, well, context matters because teams work in different contexts. They may work in, say, a help desk versus a multi-million-dollar project. Their context is very different. So can you say that for those different types of agile teams, one method or one framework is the best one, is an optimal one? So let me ask, so if you take yourselves on mute, if you want to chime in, have you seen that be the case? I can tell you in my experience, I have definitely seen the case where one method or one framework becomes the hammer and everything has to go along with it, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense. Has anyone else seen that occur? I'm going to take silence as a yes.
Yes, Steve.
Thanks, Mike. I know I can count on you. So Mike and I worked together in the past, but I think we've seen some of these the same things, right? Everything must be done one way and one way only. I saw that in a waterfall. Yeah. So it's that desire for overt control and consistency that pulls us away from the intent of Agile. So let's move on. But also too, with adaptive methods. So Agile methods are meant to be adaptive, meaning they set you up with the minimal you need to do. And for Scrum, it's now 11 things, right? It's the events, the roles, and the artifacts. But adaptive methods have blind spots. What I mean is Scrum doesn't tell you how to handle documentation, doesn't tell you how to do testing, doesn't tell you how to do deployment or architecture for that matter. So lean methods, adaptive methods are that way on purpose. But what often happens when we don't know how to handle documentation in Scrum? We fall back on the old way of doing things. Same with these other bullet points here as well. We just fall back to our natural state, which is the way we've traditionally done things in the past. And that, again, pulls us away from agility a little bit as well, because we don't have a way to address those organizational needs, those things we need for maybe risk and control factors, way to demonstrate things. So adaptive methods just have inherent blind spots that people have to try to think about what's the best way to go through this. And we often just fall back in old behavior. So what's Disciplined Agile? PMI says it's a people-first, learning-oriented, hybrid Agile approach to IT solution delivery. There's a lot there. It doesn't tell you a whole lot, right? Until you go through the process and understand what they're getting at. But the big thing that PMI advocates is that Disciplined Agile is a process decision toolkit. It is not a framework, which I think is the first significant thing to take away. You're not going to say DA versus SAFe, because SAFe is a framework, DA is a toolkit. So they're not in contention. So DA builds itself as a toolkit. And as we go through how to work a Disciplined Agile adoption, I'll show you what I mean. So more to come on that. But DA builds itself specifically as a toolkit. DA is all about choose your wow. That's their big catchphrase. Choose your way of working. And what DA says, leverage processes and practices from proven Agile methods. In other words, it's not a question of Scrum or Kanban. It's actually what's good about both of those and what can you apply in your context. By the way, there's a whole universe of other practices and processes that you could adopt as well. We'll talk more about that also. The history of DA, so it's been around a little over 10 years, originally developed at IBM by Scott Amler and Mark Lyons. Some of you may have seen this book before. Disciplined Agile Delivery was first published in 2012. I think it was a giveaway in one of the Agile conferences. And frankly, I never saw it get much traction. But as you may be aware, about 2 years ago, PMI and DA used the term merged. PMI bought Disciplined Agile's asset base and their intellectual capital base. So PMI bought Disciplined Agile. So now PMI offers certifications in Disciplined Agile that go beyond the PMI ACP, and you see some of those there. On our last slide, I'll take you a little bit more through the learning journey, but there's definitely more information and certifications out there if you're interested to learn more about Disciplined Agile. So for our overview of Disciplined Agile, if you go to the PMI's website, you'll be confronted with this graphic. This is DA's view of the enterprise. This is how they look at the world, the organization. So what you see here is these are broken out by layers. So in the disciplined DevOps layer, you see disciplined agile delivery. One thing I need to point out, though, that's really important. Disciplined agile, DA, is this enterprise view, disciplined agile enterprise. Disciplined agile delivery is the software development component of disciplined agile. So using these terms interchangeably, you have to understand what you're talking about here. DA is the holistic view. We're really going to focus on disciplined agile delivery, which is the software delivery component. This is where IT work gets done. Now, the DA enterprise is broken into what are called process blades. These blades are meant to be interchangeable. And you see here, these are specific business functions like finance, like vendor management, like sales. They're called blades because they can be replaced and changed within their own context. They're called blades because when you talk about a server farm, if you need to swap out a hard drive, that's a blade. You just plug and play, put a new one in there. So DA views the enterprise as this system of blades, process blades, that can be replaced. And you see here also, you have a scalability. The disciplined DevOps stream has the DAD layer. The value stream layer also includes other things like portfolio management, product management, program management, which if you think kind of the safe big picture, you see those different layers represented as well. Not in the same way, but they are still there accounted for in like a safe enterprise view. And then you go to the enterprise level where you have the larger, higher level business functions, asset management, people management, architecture, and such. So this is Disciplined Agile's view of a DA enterprise. What we're going to do, though, we're going to take a little deeper dive into two things. We're going to take a look at the foundation layer, which is an overall layer where they have their principles and their operating norms. We're also going to take a deep dive into Disciplined Agile delivery and how you're meant to go about working in Disciplined Agile delivery. So here's the Disciplined Agile. Let me back up a second. Here's the foundation layer, principles, promises, and guidelines. Now, if you think about SAFe, SAFe has their principles, right? DA has their principles, promises, and guidelines. So what I thought was interesting, there's some unique ones in here that I haven't seen before in other Agile frameworks or methods. Under principles, I like these context counts. That's pretty significant right there. So context is a huge factor to Disciplined Agile. They really want you to consider your context before you go through and put in any process or practice. Be pragmatic. So that's another one that kind of goes along with context, is kind of do the best thing for your context. Be pragmatic about what you do. Don't try to make everyone march to the same drum. And choice is good. So a few principles around keep an open mind, do the best thing. Don't strive for consistency necessarily. Consider where you are and where you want to get to. Also in promises and also guidelines too, you see a lot around psychological safety and diversity, and in the guidelines, create an environment that fosters joy. In the DASSM certification, much of that certification is around team building, conflict resolution, psychological safety. So it's interesting how kind of front and center they place the team, the interactions, fostering joy, which I thought was interesting. So this gets back to that kind of people first statement that DA made about Disciplined Agile, people centric, people first. It's really put out here in the principles, the promises, and the guidelines. The training, the DASM and SSM, focuses a lot on principles, promises, and guidelines and what these all mean specifically. So it is very important to DA that these are understood and internalized. Adopt measures to improve outcomes. See, very outcome focused as well. We're not saying, hey, there's metrics. We're saying let's look at outcomes, right? So moving on. getting started with Disciplined Agile delivery. So if I'm interested in bringing a team along with Disciplined Agile, what do I do? How do I go about doing this, getting that process started? So how to choose your way of working. There's a 5-step process to this. We're going to talk through these 5 steps, what they mean, and how it differs from traditional methods that you may be familiar with. First step is to analyze your context. So PMI provides this spider chart of 7 factors that tell you or inform you and help you understand how complex is your operating environment and really what risks you're going to face with those kinds of complexities and what you should consider for mitigation strategies. So, for example, if we have a geographically distributed team, well, you know what, let's go into an example. So I've got a team called the Hamburg Helpers. They're in Germany, and they support a help desk, local German applications, very little in the way of interaction with a larger enterprise. So their factors, risk and complexity factors, are low. So the closer down to the base, the less risky you are, the less risk you have. So this is a team where they're all in the same building, 25 people. It's a complex domain with some legacy. So there may be some challenges in the solution complexity that we have to consider. There's some compliance, there's some internal oversight on this. It's a single organization for distribution, and the skills are available right now. This is a help desk, right? This is the help desk application that this team is supporting. So knowing that, I have a low risk and complexity factors as I go forward. So I'm just kind of plotting that out right now. Now what I have for Santana's elves, that was my Christmas theme, the elves. We're working on a multi-million-dollar project with a globally distributed team of significant size. I've got about 100 members on the team. It's a complex domain, new integration, regulatory oversight, difficult skills to acquire, and I'm using paid partners. So I've got significant risk and complexity with this team or program. So as I go forward, I should be looking for ways to control those risks. So you can see as we go forward with our way of working, my help desk team has less risk and complexity than my project team, and my agility should reflect that. The Hamburg Helpers should have a little less process weight versus Santana's elves. We'd assume they'd have a little bit more. So the question becomes, should they have the exact same methods? And you could argue, well, no, they shouldn't. They have different contexts. Maybe SAFE works for the elves, but a scaled agile framework model wouldn't necessarily help our help desk partners, and vice versa. Maybe Kanban is best for the help desk, but it's not going to help the project team. So we charted out our risk and complexity factors. We've gone through our spider diagram. The next thing we should do is we should select our best fit life cycle. Now, what I can do real quick is just show you, if you go out to PMI's website, where is it? This is available out there. They talk about the DAD life cycles. Now, I'll take you through these real quick. So there's 6 life cycles out here. So the Agile life cycle is basically Scrum, as we all know and love it. Lean is basically Kanban. They also have flavors of that with a continuous delivery environment. And I'll explain the difference here in a second. They also have an exploratory life cycle, which is a lean startup. And the lean startup has a different model of execution. And they have a program life cycle, which is effectively a scale model that would factor, and maybe that's an appropriate life cycle for our elves team. The difference here is the Agile life cycle. So this is the Agile Scrum-based life cycle. If you look down here, what you see is they have 3 phases to them. There's an inception phase, a construction phase, and a transition phase. Inception phase is effectively a sprint zero. So they're supporting the concept of a sprint zero where we're getting up and running. And if you think back to the L's team where we have the global distribution, we may need to spend a little more time in inception because we have to get going in the right direction. There's a transition phase as well because large organizations tend to have production implementation runways. So it also supports what's called kind of a hardening sprint. You may have heard that term before. So this life cycle is supporting the notion that we don't have continuous delivery, we have a runway to hit. Let's acknowledge that, and one of our sprints may be our transition phase. The difference with continuous delivery and that is there's no inception or transition phase. If I have a continuous delivery environment, I just run construction. And I'll show you why that matters on the next slide. But what's nice too is I haven't seen these before, which are there's a lean startup cycle, and there's also a scale cycle for DA. So, and as I said, that's out there on PMI's website if you're interested. And it's interesting how they look at each of those life cycles and the differences between them. So let me back up a second. So let me ask, if you want to put this in the chat, please do so. For our help desk team, which life cycle, given our risk and complexity, might make the most sense? Go ahead and type something in the chat. Of these 6, what might make the most sense? Kanban, yeah. That's a great guess. What I'd say on Kanban, though, to remember, we have some integration that we may have to factor in. So as we go through the rest of the steps, we need to plan that. We need to coordinate our implementations with others that are working in the system. But I'd agree, I think Kanban, so the lean life cycle here may be best. But let's turn that around. How about the L's? What life cycle do you think might be best for them? And go ahead and put it in the chat. Agile, Scrum-based. So I suggest too, given the risk and complexity factors, maybe that program lifecycle may be best as we work through this. So that's another option as well, because we have about 100 people, global distribution, a lot of risk and complexity that we may need to factor in. So what we're saying is, look, context matters. We have a help desk application. We have a multi-million-dollar investment in a program. Should they really be running the same life cycle? You can certainly argue no, right? Okay. So moving on. So our teams, we picked our life cycles. So let's say we pick the Scrum-based life cycle for our help desk. Let's just use that as an example. What's our next step? Well, we have to connect the dots and make some choices. Here's where kind of the rubber meets the road in Disciplined Agile. Remember we talked about the Agile life cycle, which was Scrum. We had 3 phases. We had inception, construction, and transition because we don't have a continuous delivery environment. And we may need a little bit of startup time. So when you choose your way of working, when you start making your choices, these are all process goals. So in the inception phase, these are the goals you should have for that phase. And they're what you'd expect to be. Form the team. Okay, we've got to do that. Explore the scope, sure. Plan the release. Now, the methods themselves don't necessarily tell you how to do this, but they can give you some ideas. But how do we kind of open this all up? We'll take a look at that in a second. There's also an ongoing list of process goals, growing our team members, evolve our way of working, intake work. What does that look like? How do we make some choices there? What we're going to do is we'll take a look at Explore Scope as an example. So we're on our help desk team. What does Explore Scope mean? Let's take a look at that. But we'll also look at intake work because that's common to any team that we're going to be on, regardless of what methodology choice we suggested, because these are ongoing ones that apply to everyone. So our next step is going to make some choices. So let's say we are going to explore the scope. How do we make choices? This is a goal diagram. Yes, it is kind of like an eye chart. I freely admit that. But what we're meant to do is say, well, explore the scope. That's what we want to take a look at, right? Explore scope. Here are the components of exploring the scope. And these are the choices that we have. So what you see here is kind of a consolidation of Agile practice and process as they relate to these given process goals. So for example, if we look at, say, explore quality requirements, well, here's a list of some choices. Well, we could use acceptance criteria, or we can use an explicit list, or we can use technical stories. What's in bold is preferred, and you can see the arrow. It's kind of suggesting, yeah, you may want to consider acceptance criteria as the best option, but there's other options. Choose a work item management strategy. Same kind of thing. Work item pool, task board, work item list. Each one of these, in the book, Choose Your Wow, which I'll show you that in a second, the book will give you, here's what this means, say work item pool. What does it mean? But it also tells you what are the trade-offs. If I do select this, what am I giving up, right? It kind of gives you a pro and con of each of these choices. So again, what I'm meant to do is say, in my explore scope of my inception phase, these are the things I should be aware of. These are my process goals. These are the choices that I should make. Explore usage, again, you see using epics, personas, user stories, user story maps. It's all out there. And again, that's why I say it's kind of a consolidation of process and practice. It's all here for you to make choices. Those are the choices that you make. Here's how we're doing these things, and draw those lines. Similarly, here's intake work. So you see this is a common format for each of these process diagrams. Things I need to do. Well, how is the work going to be prioritized? Well, customer values probably best, but there's other ways to prioritize work. Who's going to prioritize the work? Well, ideally the product owner, but if I don't have a product owner, I can make do with a business analyst, but I'm documenting who is doing what here, right? I'm making choices and I'm saying, here's how we're going to execute and mitigate the risks I have and define a process around the intake of work. So how to choose your wow, how to choose your way of working. This is literally how you're choosing your way of working. When you select your methodology, you go through your phases, you go through your process goals, and you say how you're going to address them. You're choosing it all. The last of the 5 steps is simply practice continuous improvement. Disciplined Agile is really big on you're never done. You should pick your way of working that best fits your context at the time. As your team evolves, as your work evolves, you're definitely meant to go back in retrospect and understand what kind of choices can we make to optimize our execution and delivery. Maybe we had a product owner early, that's not working out so well. Maybe we want to go back and have a business analyst do the prioritization of the work. So we never really give up. We're meant to go back, continuously improve, and continuously adjust our way of working. So that's really Disciplined Agile in a nutshell. Some pros and cons, and just from what we've been through and some perspective I have just from being a coach. On the plus side, DA is very context driven and enterprise aware. That's how it positions itself. It's not one size fits all. It incorporates proven Agile methods from really the whole universe of Agile methods, which I think is a good thing. PMI and DI both say it doesn't really require extensive role training. They say that if you have the Choose Your Wow book and you have a certified DASM or SSM, you should be able to start moving towards that adoption. For example, though, if you look at, say, Scaled Agile Framework, what they say is they have a transformation roadmap, which involves a great deal of training. DA positions itself and says that we don't believe you need a lot of role training here. That's their position. What I'd like to is that it's a toolkit and not a framework, right? Frameworks can obviously be, they can kind of become the marching orders, right? We're going to use this framework, but that's not really ever the intent of frameworks, but that's how they're implemented, unfortunately, in many enterprises. but DA says it's a toolkit. Now, on the downside that I see, some challenges, and I think you'd agree, process goals and choices can be rather overwhelming. Well, they could definitely be overwhelming. Let's face it, there was a lot there that we could consider, and we have to ultimately make a choice, and that could kind of lead to analysis paralysis. There's a lot there. Agile organizations that have a low level of maturity, how do they know if they're really making a good choice? It may be used to simply validate where the enterprise is right now. And I think that's not a good thing. You don't want to walk into an enterprise and say, "Oh, well, we're disciplined agile because we just do what we want to do." It's not really the intent either. So I think it's a way to unfortunately validate that organizations are low in their maturity. It can be. And also significant variation in roles and responsibilities across an organization. So one disciplined agile delivery team may be completely different than another one. And in our example, our help desk team and our project team, our global project team, if I'm a product owner or a business person or whatever the case may be, I'm going to have a different experience based on which team I'm on. So how does that affect not just my role itself, but the responsibilities of that role and the interactions I have as that role of product owner? It could be overwhelming as well. So having said that, so let me ask you, for what we've been through, what are your thoughts? What do you think is something maybe good or challenging about Disciplined Agile? Go ahead and shout it out or put it in the chat.
One thing, Steve, which is interesting because you and I have been part of transformations and so forth. What you were showing about the process flows and so forth of the different capabilities, it almost seems like this toolkit could augment a lot of the framework that we follow. For example, the intake work and what is necessary to start up and launch, initiate, and construct that. It has a different group of maybe users or audience that might be, at more of a portfolio level. And that's really the starting point before they, plug into a framework like SAFe or something like that. I found that we had to go and establish some of those things that should be established whether you're doing waterfall or agile, but just didn't happen in the most efficient way. So that's what I see this toolkit being kind of a great reference tool to focus in on those different capabilities versus boiling the ocean.
Mike, I think that's a great perspective. And I definitely agree with that. DA positions itself to not be in contention with SAFe. It
Sure.
says that we want to harvest the best of all the methods and practices and processes out there. So I think done correctly, and with that in mind, I totally agree that I think it can augment any framework or method you may be using to help you where you have risk or you don't know how to handle certain things, like say documentation for that matter. So yeah, I think that was great perspective, Mike. I think that's
Thanks, Steve. Yeah.
So Bill said, what role is managing all these high-level choices and decisions, planning, organizing, directing, and controlling? That's a fair question, Bill. DA and PMI, the only real role that they're acknowledging right now is the DA Senior Scrum Master, the DA Scrum Master, which itself is ironic because Scrum Master is a role that is dedicated to Scrum, even though we have 6 different lifecycle choices. So PMI is aware that calling it a Scrum Master isn't really explaining what its role is and responsibilities are. But this is still a little bit of a gap in my mind too, is who's really owning this. SAFe, for example, has very defined roles all the way up and down the enterprise. DA is extremely squishy. It only really puts the DASM or DASSM or DA coach front and center, which is a concern I had was, wait a minute, you're expecting me to drive this transformation of Disciplined Agile in my role as a coach or a Scrum Master? That's impossible, flat out. Can't do it. So it's a good question. I don't think there's a really clear answer on that. It's not as, say, buttoned down as SAFe with its well-defined roles across the enterprise. Why not use the role name of project manager as a generic? Yeah. I can tell you PMI's got a lot of feedback about this. I believe as a framework or a toolkit, it will continue to evolve. I think we will see a name change. I can't tell you what it is right now. So I have been in conversations with PMI about this exact thing. And they are aware. So point well taken. I like the context-driven decisions. Is there a risk of too much variation team to team? Yeah, process master. Yeah, I like that idea too. Yeah, the risk of variation, absolutely. So if I'm a DA Scrum Master, as we use the term today, I could have very different teams, right? I could have two teams that I'm Scrum Master on, and they're very, very different. They could literally be different on every single process goal, on every choice they've made. I call that a significant risk, right? Because I'm like kind of free floating. I'm going wherever I'm needed. I'm doing whatever I need to do. So it's tough. Large organizations really want to dial in roles and responsibilities. They want to have like a product owner. This is your role. These are your responsibilities, period. Right? This is very different. It's very more open to other ways and means of doing things. So you're kind of in a continuous learning environment because you're always kind of looking at new processes and practices that may be helping you. That's that continuous improvement also. Disciplined Agile into Agile, could it be used for waterfall? Yeah, Bill, good question. When DA came out originally, and even up to about a year ago, they supported what they called serial delivery, which was waterfall. If you look on the website, they still mention waterfall. I'm going to try to jump to it because it's a really good question. Let's see. There's Kanban, continuous delivery, lean dead, lean startup program. So there's their SAFe version over there. And don't forget waterfall. Yeah, here it is. So they do talk about it. So there's more information out there, but now they're saying the DA toolkit does not support a traditional life cycle. We have purposely left traditional out of scope for DA, but they recognize that some may do it. To be honest though, I don't see why you couldn't use DA to augment your practices, whatever method you're running, and then I would include waterfall in that, because you could use some of those specific processes and practices to mitigate risks that you have regardless of methodology. So DA doesn't formally support it, but I'd say it could be used as a good risk mitigation. Now, let me explain. To me, Agile is the greatest risk mitigation tool there ever was, because you're continually demonstrating your work and getting feedback. Agile is inherently mitigating risk. So I would suggest you could probably use components of DA in waterfall. Sure, I don't see any reason why not. Any other thoughts on Disciplined Agile before we get into the learning journey and other resources?
Hey, this is Bill Barton. I'm not sure where my name shows up as a number, but at any rate, so I work for Munich Re Insurance, and so we've actually let teams have a lot of flexibility, and I think over the last couple of years, it feels like now it's gone too far. So they've kind of amped up the regulatory environment now with because of government audits and things like that. That now we have teams that do things radically different ways, and then when we try to audit the basic deliverables that they need, the consistency is like kicking us because you have a minimum standard for requirements for this team, and this team over here is just winging it completely. So trying to figure out how do you balance?
Yeah.
And maybe it's embedded, in your decisions. If it's a highly regulated company, then you're going to do things a little bit different. But as much as we've given that freedom to the teams, now it feels like we're trying to reel things back in a bit so that we can get audited and not get dinged.
Yeah, that's a great question, Bill. That's a really great question. Now, with Disciplined Agile and going through the certification, something I'd point out is that they say part of that enterprise awareness principle that they support is you have to know when you need consistency across teams, like what data would roll up for reporting.
Yep.
And where you can kind of loosen up the reins and say, well, you guys are a team that's valuable to you. You can control those things. So understanding what factors are enterprise aware we need for enterprise, and enforcing those. Could DA help you with that? I think if you saw, so I'm just thinking out loud. So I saw the process goals, right?
Mhm.
And the decisions. And if we say, look, guys, you've got to make this choice for these process goals or this process goal, so we're consistent. And there's things like, writing user stories, or your product owner always prioritizes, which I know things like that are important to auditors. They want to know who's doing the prioritization, for example, right? So I think it could help. The toolkit could help get that consistency where you feel it's warranted, because you have the list of choices. Here's things you can do. Well, we need you all to do this for this particular goal. That's what, just thinking out loud, that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, and that's where we're trying to get to. I think when I try to explain it, I want to say, well, we're all playing baseball. So you can't say I'm going to have 2 outs and I'm going to have 5 strikes. It's like each team has some basic guardrails, so to speak, so that we can keep score and kind of come out and get some comparison across teams, as much as that's not an agile.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is understand what's important to you from an enterprise perspective. An example I have is that I'm working with a company now, a pharma company, and it's all basically what I call free love agile. Everyone's doing what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know what, we've got to put the hammer down on things like consistency and how we estimate. Because we'll never be able to give perspective at an enterprise unless we have some consistency in how we estimate work.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find that balance. And, Mike Roach, I'm sure you've seen this many times as well. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, not really, Steve. You have it.
Yeah, we were in the same context, so we know what each other's saying. So, but yeah, I think it's a pendulum, right? If you go too far to full freedom, you lose the ability to track and enable some, enterprise level, program level, portfolio level decisions. So it's finding that balance.
Right. Yeah,
I agree.
Otherwise, this is good. I mean, I've actually read the books, so but I haven't tried to actually implement it to any degree. So I love all the different choices. We looked at SAFe as well, and it was just a little too heavy for us. So this is probably more to our liking. But as you said, there's the overwhelming factor here, which is like, where do you start? Yeah, but good stuff.
Yeah. That's the thing with Agile. It's like Goldilocks syndrome. You're trying to get it just right, but you're maybe hitting a moving target too. So it's hard. It's definitely hard to do. Any other questions or observations? I just got a couple wrap-up slides, and we can break. All right. So great discussion, guys. Appreciate that. Appreciate your views on this. Let's see where we are. So the learning journey. So many of you know that have been involved with PMI over the years. The PMI ACP has been available through PMI for at least 10 years or more. I mean, I can't even remember when I took the exam, but it was a long, long time ago. That was the only Agile certification PMI had, and that they supported for a long time. But with the acquisition of DA, now they have the Disciplined Agile Scrum Master, which doesn't really require a lot of Agile experience. It's kind of the basic introduction to the DA framework. There's a DA Senior Scrum Master, which asks for a couple of years of Agile experience. What I tell you is the DASM I found pretty valuable to go through. I thought it was very interesting. And a lot of it's kind of what you see here. The DASSM talks about how to relate to other process blades. Because remember, DAD, Disciplined Agile Delivery, is our IT software component. So the DASM says, well, how do you interface with finance, for example, as a process blade? But it also talks about teaming, conflict resolution, building a high-performing team. So there's kind of a soft skill side of this, and also like a practical, how do you deal with other enterprise groups. So that's the DASSM. I found that a little less valuable than the DASM. And I think these are like $400, I want to say, for the cert class. You could do them online, on demand. And if you're interested, I recommend going through those. From there is a DA coach, which you have to be a senior Scrum Master at least to go through. I think this is largely in-person training right now. I don't think it's on demand. Pretty sure it's not, or remote learning. And then the value stream consultant is kind of the last leg to this, where you are literally that a value stream consultant. DA has a concept of the value stream baked into it. There are tools to support it, but I chose not to go through that today because that we could spend the whole session talking about value stream mapping. So I didn't want to go that far. So that's PMI's learning journey if you're interested in DA. And also for more information, there's the book that we're using, Choose Your Wow. If you sign up for the DASM cert, you'll get this book as a PDF as part of your class. You won't get the hard copy, obviously, you'll just get the PDF. Then PMI.org has a Disciplined Agile website, which I took you to, and you can see all of the information about DA out there. And there's also a Disciplined Agile group on LinkedIn if you're curious about, are there practitioners out there talking about using it? What are some of the things that they're seeing? I'll admit I have not seen a lot of DA in the wild in practice, but a LinkedIn group would be the place to go to see, hey, is anyone trying this? Has anyone had success with this? So those are the best resources I can suggest for looking into Disciplined Agile. And with that, it's 12:50. So that's the presentation. Are there other questions, observations, anything else that we want to share before we break?
I'll share that this, for me, was very informative. It's new information, and my organization is going through some reorgs, and they're looking at how to recast our Agile teams and our Scrum teams. And I think there's, just from this presentation, it has given me a nice jumping off point to get more information to help us out. So thank you very much.
Great, glad to hear it. Bill, yeah, I just say I've not seen a lot of this in use. I think you can see there's a fair amount of startup involved in this, just in understanding how to make those choices and put those in play. But I haven't seen a lot of it happening. But I like the idea of like taking this type of approach and kind of what Mike Roach was saying, kind of maybe baking it into what you have, seeing how it can augment your implementation or transformation of Agile. So it can be a very good resource for that, even if you don't necessarily go full Disciplined Agile. There are good things to consider and practices to try that can help mitigate risk. And again, some of those, if you come from a waterfall world, the whole concept of like a sprint zero and a hardening sprint, they're not really big on that in like say Scrum and Kanban and SAFe. They kind of like the continuous delivery model, but DA factors those things in. Says if you're very risky, you may want to have like a sprint zero, get the right direction before you go forward. So it's got more flexibility to it than say a defined methodology, because again, it's a toolkit. Cool. So thank you, Bill. Appreciate that.
Steve, one question, and thank you for this. This is very informative, and appreciate your doing it today. Do you need to have a certification to have access to the toolkit, or can anyone have access to the toolkit, or how's that work?
I don't think you need access, or I think you can get at the toolkit. Yeah, there's a lot out there on the website. The Choose Your Wow book is out there. Anyone can have that. So I know. So Mike, you're probably thinking like, well, Scaled Agile, I gotta like sign in and get everything. And it's not like that I've seen. The resources are out there. I think it's just the certification itself. You would have to go through, pay for the class and do all that stuff. But from what I can recall, the resources are largely available either on the website, or the Choose Your Wow book is certainly out It's on Amazon.
Thank you.
35
Thank
bucks. Yeah. Good question though, because we know how Scaled Agile works, right?
Right.
So, cool. Okay. Well, that said, I think we're going to make this presentation available online. I think we recorded it, so I can check back with you guys and let you know where the assets are available. I'd encourage you, if you have questions or you want to reach out, something you haven't thought of in today's session, feel free to reach out to me or to Agile Hartford, and maybe we'll see you at one of our other December events.
Sounds good. Thanks, Steve.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Hey, thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
Steve.
See you guys soon.
Take care.